All right, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is David Milton, Judge of the Los Angeles Superior Court, retired. To introduce myself, I'm presently a candidate for District Attorney of Los Angeles County, and I can give you a summary of my experience at this time. I'm a former Deputy District Attorney for Los Angeles County as well. I moved from the District Attorney's office. I was appointed Judge of the Los Angeles Municipal Court. From there, I was appointed Chief Assistant Prosecutor in Indianapolis, and I returned to California, where I was appointed Assistant Chief Trial Counsel for the State Bar of California. Thereafter, I was appointed to Judge of the Los Angeles Superior Court by former Governor Pete Wilson. I served 24 years on the courts. Well, I decided to seek the office of a district attorney because of the mishandling of the office by present Judge, District Attorney George Gascon. He's done a miserable job. I want to return that office to the stellar reputation that it enjoyed at one time nationwide. I want to get it back on track. And what I mean by that, the District Attorney's core mission is public protection, and George Gascon has failed to carry out that mission. Well, as I indicated before, the total time as a judicial officer, as a judge, I spent 5 years on the Los Angeles Municipal Court, 19 years on the Los Angeles Superior Court. My total time as a prosecutor has been 12 years, and during that time as a prosecutor, I handled some of the most difficult cases that are handled in any jurisdiction in the entire United States. The assignment in my prosecutorial role that I am most proud of is in the hardcore gang division. Those cases were some of the most difficult cases ever. Often they involve multiple defendants who committed murder, multiple murder victims, complex conspiratorial theories, often involving witness intimidation, witness killings. 2 juries were required sometimes. Witness relocation and protection. Those were some of the most difficult cases ever. I tried those cases almost back to back as a prosecutor. I was able to achieve 1 death verdict. Most of the verdicts were life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The 1 death verdict, many prosecutors don't achieve a death verdict in their entire career. In my career, I was able to achieve 2 death verdicts as a prosecutor, and as a judge, I sentenced an individual to death. Now, that may sound harsh. However, the citizens of California have voted twice that they would like to have, they want the death penalty to be a possible punishment. And that's the law that we must follow as prosecutors, whether we agree with the law or not. Earlier in time, prosecutors used to proceed on the basis of, if you're seeking capital punishment, that means life imprisonment without the possibility of parole or death. You had to prove, you needed to proceed under Penal Code Section 190.222, and that means you must prove that the murder was committed by a gang member, meaning necessarily you'd have to prove he's a member of the gang. Secondly, and he did it for the purpose of furthering the gang's purposes. Well, because of the onerous nature and the requirements of proving the elements of that crime, it occurred to me, well, let's look at what gang members do. What do they do? Gang members usually will commit murder by a drive-by shooting or shooting into an inhabited dwelling. And so I authored the legislation, shooting into an inhabited dwelling and drive-by shootings. The reason I thought drive-by shootings were so important, because the drive-by shooter, or the perpetrator, he's likely to be able to avoid law enforcement detection because he's in a vehicle. The victims, he catches that victim by surprise. He also exposes innocent bystanders to a high degree of injury or death, and I thought that warranted capital punishment treatment. shooting into an inhabited dwelling. I thought people ought to feel secure in their homes with their families and not worry about bullets flying through the windows and doors and walls. So I thought that warranted capital punishment treatment. I authored those proposed legislation, submitted them to former Senator Ed Royce of Orange County. Senator Royce submitted those proposals to the legislature. He sponsored them, and we were able to get the first one passed, drive-by shooting into an inhabited dwelling. We were not successful in getting that one legislated. I also, because I was a victim of stalking at one point in my career, I co-authored the stalking legislation, and again through Senator Royce, he sponsored that one, and we were able to get that to become a part of the penal code as well. So I think those were key pieces of legislation, and I'm very proud of that accomplishment. In Indianapolis, I left my position as a municipal court judge and took a position in Indianapolis as chief assistant prosecutor. And one might think, well, why would you do that? Why would you leave a judgeship and again become a prosecutor? Well, there was some methodology to that. I was asked to handle the prosecution against Mike Tyson in Indianapolis on the charge of rape. I was also asked to set up a gang prosecution team. And then it was believed that former President George H.W. Bush would appoint me to the United States District Court, which is a lifetime appointment. Well, as it turns out, I arrived in Indianapolis. Mr. Tyson stood on his speedy trial rights, and he had been successfully prosecuted before my arrival. I did set up the prosecution team. And, of course, as you know, former President Bush was unsuccessful in his re-election bid, so I was not appointed to the district court. And so at that point, I returned to California as Assistant Chief Trial Counsel with the State Bar. I agree that I do have a good life. I'm in a fairly lucrative private practice with ADR services, where I handle arbitrations, mediations, complex discovery matters. And however, since George Gascon became District Attorney of Los Angeles County, he refuses to follow the law. It irritates me that he lets criminals, where there's substantial proof that that individual has committed the crime, proof beyond a reasonable doubt, yes, he refuses to file the appropriate charges. Let me give you for instance, those smash and grab type activities that have been happening all over the county. He wants to somehow undercharge those cases. Those are serious matters. Smash and grab, think about that. Someone enters the business of the victim and uses force on that person either before or after, like a repellent, bear repellent, I believe, was used in one of the later most recent cases. Well, that's not just a petty theft that should be given minor treatment. That's the type of case that is now a robbery. The case law is very clear that if you approach a victim and you take the person's property by force or fear, say for instance, bear repellent is the force, or you took the property and the victim is attempting to recapture his property and you use force on him at that time. Those are robberies. The case law is very clear, and Mr. Gascon refuses to file the appropriate charges in those cases. There are other cases, death penalty cases, that are very, very serious, and I'll discuss that at a later time. Well, one of the first things I would do is reverse the destructive policies implemented by George Gascon. He's not concerned with public safety. That's what he's done. He's dismantled some of the most effective and efficient prosecution teams the office has ever had. Career criminal, habitual criminals, hardcore criminal, and those types of programs were very effective in in combating recidivism and gang activity that's almost rampant in Los Angeles County. So that is something that I will address on day one.